My name is Joe Freed. I work with a firm called Freed Goldberg out of Atlanta, Georgia, and my specialty is truck accident law.
Let's go back. How long have you been practicing?
Almost 30 years. I started in 1993.
Wow. All right. Let's go back about 34 or 35 years. Right. Everybody's decision to go to law school is different. Some people, saw Atticus Finch when they were 4 years old and they figured out that's what they wanted to do for forever. But what was your decision like? Right? Why did you want to become a lawyer, and why did you ultimately become one?
Wow, and it probably starts, why did I become a lawyer? I think about that sometimes, and I think I was always, even from the time I was a kid, I hated bullies. And then so I grow up and I end up in high school, I lose 4 friends in 32 days in crashes. And that took me into a short law enforcement career. I spent about 6 years in police work. As a police officer, I sat in a lot of courtrooms, and there's something about a courtroom. I remember even as a young police officer thinking, this is a place where important stuff happens. And then if you stay long enough, you see that justice is not blind. Justice, a lot of it depends on who your lawyer is. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. Sitting in the courtroom, turned into a meeting one time with a judge who called me into chambers and basically looked at me in my police uniform and said, "What are you doing? Dude, you need to go do something more." And he encouraged me to go to law school. And I said, "Really?" And so that's how it all started. And so then law school. So that was it.
There's a term that I use in a lot of these interviews, and it's the inception of purpose, right? It's that point in our lives. And if we're blessed, I think it doesn't happen for everybody, but it's that point in our lives when we figure out, okay, this is what I was meant to do, right? This right here, this lane that I'm in is what I'm gonna travel in, and this is the path I should be on. Well, when did that happen for you? It sounded like you figured out at a certain point, like, okay, right, after you went to law school, maybe, was there a certain point when you're like, okay, all right, now I'm working against the bullies, I'm helping people, and I'm making things happen, that thing you noticed in the courtroom way back?
So we're talking about purpose, and for me, the most recent iteration of Joe Freed is this truck accident lawyer. And when I started that, there weren't, it's very different than the world is today, where you can't drive by a billboard and not see a billboard that's going to be about a truck crash, right? Back then, nobody talked about being a truck crash lawyer. And for me, I knew I was a niche player early. I had this intense need to be a subject matter expert in whatever I did. So when I was at the beginning of my career, I was a birth trauma lawyer. I studied medicine at a ridiculous level. I mean, it really is, but it was big. It comes from my fear. It comes from not feeling like I'm going to be good enough. So I feel like I have to overdo it. I went into product liability, but not just any product liability. I handled post-rear collision, fuel-fed fire cases. Think Pinto. But I would tell people I'm good if the wreck happened from this corner to this corner, but once you get around to the side, I'm the wrong lawyer for you. I mean, that's how niche down it was. But even today, 20 years later, I could draw you the fuel containment system for just about any car on the road because I studied the engineering at a very deep level so that I could go head to head with whoever the best was. And then Ford changed I had told Ford, if you change the design of the Mustang, I'll quit suing you. And they were like, who are you? You're just some kid in Atlanta. Well, eventually, 10 years later, they changed the design of the Mustang. They called me up and they said, you said. And I said, yeah. I said, come down, resolve all your cases with me. They did. I woke up with no cases. So then I had to flounder around and try to figure out what the hell I was going to be when I grew up again. And for a couple of weeks leading up to a particular day, everything I saw had to do with truck crashes. I turn on the TV, there's a truck crash. I even got on an airplane and somebody left industry magazine open to a safety problem in the seat pocket in front of me, and I was like, really, for real, so that couple of nights later, I'm tossing and turning. So I think I'm supposed to do truck crash law. The only problem was I didn't have any truck crash cases. Well, that didn't take long. That morning, I went in fully invigorated for the first time in a while. I was taking myself off of all these boards that I had found myself on for handling product cases, saying I went to sleep last night a product lawyer. I woke up this morning a truck crash lawyer, and people were asking me what I ate and what I smoked the night before. And they thought I was crazy because I had built a very successful products practice. I went from being a product lawyer to never doing another product case once I said I'm a truck crash lawyer. And that very morning at 8:15 in the morning, I get a phone call on my direct line, a woman who sounded very far away. And I said, how can I help you? And she said, this morning my husband was killed. And I said, I'm so sorry, what happened? He was on the side of the road and a truck came and killed him. I said, how do you know to call me? And she said, I'm not sure, somebody gave me your name and your number. And I said, don't talk to anybody else, I'm on my way, And that was a few weeks before Thanksgiving. And by the end of the year, I had 4 truck death cases. And so I've never looked back. I mean, I know without any zero doubt that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And at this point, it's beyond handling truck cases. It's creating this world of people who know how to handle truck crash cases.
Right. Specialization, it's a unique part of what makes us civilized, right? Because we can go to people who specialize in something. And you being a trucking accident expert, that means when that woman calls, or when you get a client that comes in and they say, hey, look, my uncle died in this trucking accident case, and it's a complex case. A regular attorney who doesn't have that understanding, maybe won't win that case, right? So for you, what is it, if you had to describe the world of trucking accident cases, what makes it so unique? What are the causation factors? What do you usually find yourself dealing with in an average trucking case that you're now so well suited to handle?
Well, so the thing about trucking cases is if you know how to handle an auto wreck case, you think you know how to handle a truck crash case. And what you don't know, you don't know. And that's the problem, is that when I started looking at trucking, I saw that this is a whole world unto itself. It's an industry that's totally and completely unique. And for me, I knew that based on my past, based on who I am, I'm going to have to study this at a deep, deep level. The question is really sort of what makes these cases different, and the answer is everything, from the size and the weight and the dynamics of driving a truck to how high a truck driver sits, to all the rules and regulations that govern trucking specifically, that go way beyond what we know when we're driving cars. So it's a very, very unique industry, and both at the driver level and at the company level and all of the other players in the transportation cycle, the relationships. It's a relationship business. It's a document business. It's a data business. It's not just a driving a truck down the road business. And so for me, that is that side. And then the other part of my existence is really, I've always been a student of human beings and how do we work? What makes us tick? How do we make decisions? Why do we make decisions? And what I found is that in our field in law, there's a reluctance to, there's a formalism to law, and we lose the humanity of it. And even those on the plaintiff side, we don't really open our hearts up, because if you do, it hurts. And we don't, our human animal doesn't want to hurt. But if you really, truly feel people and what they're going through, man, that's hard. And then if you're the lawyer for that person, you feel the weight of that.
One thing I talk to trial lawyers about all the time is something that I call the trial lawyer's armor, right? And on one side of that armor is the client, right? Getting to know the client, opening up to the client, right? Understanding their story. What was their life like before? If it's a wrongful death case, what was that person's life like, right? What were their relationships like? What happened to them, right? If they're alive, what are they going through right now? And then, of course, what's their life life likely to be because of the injuries that they suffer.
Sure.
And on the other side is the skill set, is the expertise, is the knowledge and understanding, the trial strategy and tactics, and all of those things that make a great lawyer a good practitioner, right? And in my opinion, to be good, you have to have both, because you can have all the skills in the world, but if you don't know your client, you haven't opened up to your client, what are you advocating for and who are you advocating for? And then on the flip side, you can know your client inside and out, but if you don't have the skills, you don't have the expertise, and in trucking cases, right, where there are so many factors that you're describing at play, if you don't have an understanding of them, maybe you shouldn't take that case, right? But let's start with this first side, right? And, from that first call with this trucking case, my husband was killed on the side of the road. And I can tell, being a student of human beings, that your clients matter. How do you connect with your clients? How do you internalize their story so that you can be a brilliant and a great and successful advocate for them?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you get to know your client? How do you do it in a way that's appropriate? And I don't believe in coincidences. If I'm the lawyer in the case, it's my primary job to figure out why me. So before client, and I know this sounds maybe a little different, but if you'll bear with me, hopefully it'll make sense, because I don't really talk about this much. But for me, I believe intensely it's my job to figure out why, of all the lawyers out there, why me? And it's not only expertise in truck crash law, because that's why they've come, but I think it's deeper than that. And if you look at the cases that I've handled, my clients teach me. My clients inform me. They teach me about myself. They teach me what's ugly about myself. They teach me to confront my own fears. You handle a case for somebody who's lost a child. I'm gonna cry. I'm getting emotional sitting here. I start thinking about my kids, and I don't know that I could I don't know that I could do what they do. You see people they've lost 2 or 3 of their limbs, and you go, oh my God, how do you do that? And so for me, I have to figure out, and I tell people this all the time, your job, lawyer, is to go figure out why you. There's a bunch of damn lawyers out here in the world, and some of them are really, really good. But why you? And when you figure that out, magic happens. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, but I get it, because I think when we can situate ourselves in a situation, right, in a relationship, right, with a client, if I can situate myself and say, okay, when I get to an understanding of why me, then the answer to that is going to be, okay, well, what can I do for this person?
That's right.
If the ball is in my hands, right, and I understand that I got to go from here to that goal line, right, then I start to orient myself, right. I know which direction I got to go. I got to run this way this hard. I got to run that way that hard. And that starts to inform how seriously you take the case. And I would imagine in your situation where you're dealing with catastrophic injuries, once you're able to kind of orient yourself, where does it go from there, right?
Yeah, the orientation is everything. And it's interesting because, I'm saying I don't believe in coincidences and the why me. The why me then also informs why each juror. Why is the adjuster that's assigned to the case? Why that adjuster of all the adjusters in the world? Why that trucking company? What's really going on? And I think there are levels to this. And so, call it esoteric, but I think that's where we fail as the lawyer, is that we have to be willing to be fully vulnerable to the situation. You have to make a commitment to that, or I should say I do. Every single day, I remind myself of a couple things in the morning. I remind myself to be grateful, and I remind myself that my job today is to be vulnerable. My job today is to be credible. And sometimes it hurts to be vulnerable, and sometimes it hurts to be credible, if you know what I'm saying. To get up and say, what does credibility mean? It means that I've got to be willing to look at the world honestly, and I can't buy my own crap. I've got to be willing to, when somebody throws something at me, really hear it for what's there. I've got to be willing when I make a mistake, and I'm going to own it fully and completely and without spin. I've got to really say I'm sorry if I mean it. And I've been that guy in a courtroom where I've let the words come out of my mouth, or they just came out, and then you want to grab them and pull them back. And I've been that husband who, God knows, I wish I could take some of the words back. And I've been that father. And so all of these inform me as a lawyer. All these roles inform me as the lawyer.
When you go into a courtroom and it's your job, right? That person, back behind you to your left they're counting on you. And you're standing there in between your client and the jury, right? And you're the bridge, right? You're the conduit. What's that like for you? How do you view that space that you fill and that role that you have? Because they can't bridge that gap themselves. How do you see that specific aspect of your role as a lawyer?
So, in a courtroom, I'm standing between my client and the jurors, and it feels like a big gap, and I'm supposed to be the bridge to the gap. If I've done my job right, the gap disappears, and it's not about me. The gap disappears, and I believe that you try a case to a juror at a time, one at a time. It's not a jury. Have you ever been able to talk to a jury? What is a jury? There's this assumption that we have that that suddenly because you bring your individuality into a group, you lose your individuality. I don't believe that. I believe when I talk to a jury, I look at one juror, and my discussion with that one juror is a witnessed event. And then this person's waiting for me to come to them and talk to them, and when I do, I give them 100% of me if I can. I wish that was true. I wish I could always give them 100% of me. That's my goal. But I know if I give that person my me, then I have to trust that's going to be good enough. But what I mean by the gap disappearing is the case ultimately. I was talking before about sort of the esoteric part of why am I the right lawyer? Why are you the right juror? Why are you the right collection of people that came together to solve this one problem, this one issue, to do justice? Why you? And so my job in that role is to make the gap disappear, because I need those jurors to be my client. I need those jurors to be the voice of the community at the same time. They need to be both. And so my job is to pick, and I'm saying this very carefully, to pick what my case needs to be about to make that happen. And too many lawyers focus just on the incident. That's not where the heat is. It's got to get to the humanity of it. It's why, a quick example is you have a truck crash. The truck runs into somebody and causes injury. What's the defense do? The defense then wants to make they want to run the person over again. They want to now make them feel like the liar, the cheater, the malingerer, the whatever. Imagine that. How different do you feel if somebody does you wrong and they come and say, "Hey man, I'm so sorry. How can I make this right?" You can't really stay pissed at them. They might have hurt you bad. You may be in a wheelchair the rest of your life, but you're going to react to them differently if they're coming to you and saying, "Hey, the heart is there, But what about the person who runs you over, puts you in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, and then gives you the proverbial verbal finger? Mm-hmm. You know what? You're the bad person. Right. You're malingering. You're making this worse than it is. So that's what it's about to me.
In your many years of practice, I just respect the fact that the granularity of understanding that you seek, right? Going back to the initial niche that you dove into, how do you see improvement and learning? How important has that been over the course of your career in terms of you getting better, you improving, and you providing the best representation that you can so that your clients get what they deserve?
If I ever stop seeking to be better, I need to hang it up, right? And better can mean different things. But when you're a lawyer, it's sort of interesting. Lawyers sometimes feel like they're in over their head, and they need to get to the finish line, and they bring other lawyers like me in. And I'm at a point now in my career where what I'd really like to do is teach and empower that lawyer, as opposed to just have it be about me. I changed my goals a number of years ago to try to be the guy who's helping other people to succeed. because at the core, I really want to leave this place better than I found it. And that's in a number of ways. One, on the highways, I want to leave it safer than I found it. Well, I can't do that by myself. And it's why I teach so frequently now, is because I want to build an army of people who know how to do what I'm doing. I want to keep advancing the ball, but I learn, when I teach, I learn as much as I give, maybe more. So it's always a quest to improve. It's always a quest to continue to push forward. And there's never been a better time than now for a lawyer to come, and the opportunities that are available within organizations to become the best you, and therefore to become the best lawyer you, are out there. And I mean that, I said it that way on purpose, because it's about development of you as a human being first, and then as a lawyer second. But the skill sets, and it's constantly evolving. I mean, I'm spending my life now working on reconceptualizing trial. You know, I'm looking at it and saying, I'm kind of surprised we don't still put wigs on to go into court. I really am. It's so formalistic. But yet the world has moved on. You know, the world, when that was invented, nobody had a cell phone. Today, the cell phone is the modern blankie. I mean, you can't go anywhere. You imagine what it would be like if they took your phone away. But those are, you know, I think that's where I am in my life now. I'm looking at this. I have the perch. I finally feel like I'm pretty good at this. And now my job is to see if I can advance the ball within this profession that we call the practice of law.
I just want to talk a little bit more about trucking specifically, because until you really just said it earlier, you know, I hadn't thought about it in the sense that there's a lot of physics that don't exist in regular car accidents. What are kind of some of the core areas of a trucking accident case that a lawyer that's thinking about going into trucking accidents that they should definitely understand?
Trucking's different in every respect. I mean, for me personally, I wanted to know everything I could. I went to truck driving school. Okay, I can back a boat up great now, but don't ask me to really drive a tractor trailer. You know, but I think that what you need to do if you're a lawyer and you want to be engaged in this space, first surround yourself with others who know what they're doing, so that you can build a mentorship base, and that exists, of good people who want to just teach you. They've got the heart to do it, and they live by the motto that a rising tide rises all boats. And so surround yourself. And in that process, then you have to delve into this industry. You have to understand what it is to be a driver, and you have to have some empathy, hopefully, and some respect for these men and women who are out there driving trucks every single day. That's hard work. They're not the enemy. The industry is not the enemy. Dangerous practices are the enemy. So we have to understand that life and that industry. We have to understand the relationships. So you study the regulations. You study the rules, you get better and better at this, the deeper and deeper you understand the industry. So what I tell people who want to do this is, I'll give you a bibliography of things to start to study. Then it's up to you if you want to go and do it. But it's about understanding first that, and then you can get deeper and deeper into it. Now you can go to truck driving school. Learn what it is to make a daggum left turn in a tractor trailer truck, and it'll change your whole way you practice law as a truck crash lawyer. Go take a accident reconstruction course that's designed for people who work within that accident field, and see how the dynamics are different. I mean, think about the bumper differentials. Think of the weight differentials. I mean, it's totally and completely different than what happens in a car-to-car crash. So there's lots of layers. But I would say the first layer, if you really want to make a commitment to this, is read the regulations and read the commercial driver's license manual, just as a very basic starting point. And it'll already change the way you practice law in this space.
I'm going to go back to that conversation you had with that judge. And that judge said you need to do more.
Yeah.
You know, and then to take that guidance, right, that the universe gave you, and to really do it justice. What would you tell that judge if you can go back to him and say, hey, look, this is what I did with that tidbit of advice that you gave me? How do you feel about how far you've come?
Well, how far have I come? You know, I came from not very much. And I've come to a point where I have much more than I ever deserved, but I've worked hard to get here. I'm thankful that people have poured into me, because I don't know what I'd be if it wasn't for that. I don't know what I'd be if it wasn't for my wife putting up with me, with my kids being who they are. But then to that judge who first encouraged me, I'm thankful to him. You know, I'm thinking about him because he's on his deathbed right now. And I've been trying to get to him to thank him, and he doesn't really want to see anybody. So he's at that point in his life now. But here's the thing I tell people who may be watching this, who may be earlier in their career. It's an exercise in fear management. It's an exercise in being willing to step into that vulnerable place and just take the chance. Be different. Don't be the conformist. You know, I remember as a young lawyer, I'm in a room in a conference, and I'm looking around. It's a bunch of lawyer heads everywhere I can see. And I remember feeling about this big. And I remember looking around and saying, you know, I don't come from what these people come from. I'm not the son of the governor. I'm not the fourth generation that's done this. I don't have $1 billion verdict. I mean, how can I be anything? Why should anybody hire me? I'd say, I wouldn't hire me. I'd go hire that guy over there, you know? And then somebody came to me and said, what does it take to be an expert in something? And I said, a PhD in 20 years. And they said, no, that works too, but it's different. If you want to be an expert in something, as soon as you write something authoritative, creative, individual, yourself, you wrote it, and you're asked by your peer group to stand up on a stage and present it to them, they're looking at you as an expert. And for some reason that made sense to young Joe. And I went to my local state trial lawyers organization and said, who puts these programs on? That's how it all started. And here I am 30 years later. I do probably about 100 talks a year to lawyer groups. And so that's my advice. If you feel like I felt about this big, go make yourself a little niche. Go figure out where it is. And it shouldn't be about money. Money will take care of itself if you just find the passion. You find the passion. What is it that you want to spend your life fighting for? If you find that, the magic will happen.